Shall we proceed? Anshula?
Yes, we are live now.
Yes, proceed, please.
Yeah. So, good afternoon, friends. Am I audible now? No problem, no?
Yes, please go
No.
on.
So, good afternoon, friends. We assembled here again on this 19th of November 2020. And it is needless to say again and again that how this COVID situation that started almost a year back, and this pandemic became a global one and devastated all the economies, and the countries of Southeast Asia or South Asia are not an exception. And all the sectors like your trade, business, production activities, agriculture, tourism, everything have been affected, and our GDP in the previous 2 quarters gone down severely. It will be very difficult to revive it now. And looking at this, the various governments also tried to adopt various policies to revive the production activities as well as the employment sectors, so as to maintain the tempo of the economy or revive from the depression that we are seeing during last 6 or 7 months, like that. So what are those policies and how it helps in reviving the economy and encourage and enhance the trade possibilities also? That is a part of the different government's policies, along with the other policies, how to contain the pandemic, how to revive agricultural sector, which is considered to be a savior, and many more steps have been taken. So initially the government of India also have taken to give some free rations, at least to provide the survival of the people who lost their job, especially in the informal sector and the backward communities, which is a very big chunk of the total population of the country. And thereafter, time to time, introduced various policies and relaxations are given to provide liquidity in the market and to revive the production activities amidst the lockdown and after the lockdown during this unlock phases. Even a couple of days back, some new policies have been introduced and measures taken to revive the industrial production activities. And so trade is also related to this production activities, and looking at the government efforts how to revive and its policies to assess that. You know that the South Asia Study Center of Impact Policy Research Institutes, on behalf of its Economic Development Division, on the state of this economic development in South Asia, has started a series of discussions where the experts from various countries of South Asia deliberating on various issues which are relevant in their respective countries. And before this, we have a discussion on the agricultural development that was delivered by Professor Elias Hossain from Bangladesh. Then on the disaster management and climate change policies in Sri Lanka, Professor Rekha Niyanti. Then on the trade issues and East Asian integration, how it was affected and government policies intervened, that was delivered by Dr. Raghuvir Vista from Kathmandu. That was basically on Nepal and also on other countries of South Asia. So in that same line today, we have with us Professor Prabir, who did his PhD from Jadavpur University, and now are working as he is working as a professor in the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, RIS, New Delhi, and he is also holding the post of coordinator of the Asian India Center, AIC, at the same RIS. He also worked in international economic and development issues and worked as a visiting fellow in the ADB's Institute, Tokyo. Also, he was a visiting senior fellow at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok earlier. He has been conducting policy researches for the government of India and for various international organizations. I had gone through, he has numerous research papers published in international journals and in edited volumes. And also he wrote a number of edited books on the international trade, development, East Asian integration, and many more related issues. He is currently also the editor of the South Asia Economic Journal that is published by the CSAS publication. Also, he has the interest apart from international trade, the regional integration, cooperation, especially India-ASEAN integration. I see almost every week he delivers some lectures here and there. And not only the publications, he regularly participates in seminar and discussions and also conduct various projects. So more than 100 projects as well as seminars he has completed and participated so far. So today he will be delivering on changing dynamics of India's trade in this COVID-19 era, and so related government policies, their effectiveness, how to go about it. So now I think we invite Honorable Dr. De to deliver his speech. Professor Prabir De, now the floor is yours. Kindly go ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor Utpal Kumar De. By the way, we are not a family related. So if somebody might be thinking that we both are, the relatives, of course we are good friends. And, I've been following Professor De very closely, his research works at NEHU and along with other colleagues. And when the offer came to me by Dr. Arjun Kumar, this new organization. So I said, fine, we will be certainly be very happy to come back to his organization and deliver a speech, a talk. So I thought that it's a good opportunity for me to interact with the wide audience, who will be looking at or working on the international trade. And presently I am on leave in Calcutta. So I will be happy to keep it short, and then we will pick up some questions, and also see in the audience my good friends Dr. Shomesh from IIT, and also Amrita from Sussex University, those who closely work on international trade. Now what I will be doing for next 30 minutes and half an hour or so, that I will be picking up some relevant issues on international trade, and the paper we have been writing with my colleague Dr. Durairaj Kumarasamy. He is also here with us as a panelist. So and jointly we have been writing a paper. So I thought just to present the first cut of the results and things. And then we pick up some questions, and then maybe let's see how it goes. So let me share my PowerPoint with you first, and yeah, I think this is visible to all of you. Professor De, can you see this slide?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Good. Now, this my presentation. It is certainly certainly not giving very deep policy outcomes for the people working in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. This presentation is sort of an academic one, and it is a work in progress. So there could be many drawbacks, or there could be scope for further improvement. So that's what I need from you and the audience here to say comments on it, either bilaterally or through email later on. This paper, this paper has primarily 4 research objectives. So one is to assess the impact of COVID-19 on trade openness and value chain participation. I will, as we move, I will share some of the disclaimers. Like when I said the impact of COVID-19 on trade openness and value chain, there are some data limitations. Second point is, so that limitation I will also have to tell you, and as I said, it's a work in progress. So we cannot be, the 100% correct while, you play with the data. So, and as you know that this kind of empiric work, you always suffer from, data limitations. So that's point we always have to keep in mind, because we have looked at the quarterly data. When we started working on this, quarter ended in March 2020. Now the data is available up to June in the first half of 2020. So my might be, we will expand this model to cover up to June 2020. So that kind of disclaimer I will have to make very upfront. But the orientation, the direction, they may not change much that way. To assess the impact of trade costs on Indian exports, to forecast India's exports based on the gravity modeling framework, and then I look at this 2 days world. It is more kind of a trade facilitation, not just a trade liberalization. And so we looked at, if we move for a trade facilitation in this changing world trade. I mean, I underline the changing world trade because you all know that there is the emerging global order at the moment. There is a discussion happening, decoupling, the discussion happening, deglobalization, etc., etc. So we look at the fourth research objectives is that what is the role that trade facilitation, to bring the economies closer and to facilitate the global trade. So these are the 4 research objectives. Briefly, I will touch upon in next, 25 minutes or so. The one, kind of an introduction that you all agree that, there is a sharp decline during the COVID, and I'm not going to talk about, you all know about it, that what happened with the COVID and why trade had fallen. There's a positive relations, but here there is a 2, line graph. One is basically with the absolute data, absolute industrial trade volume, both in export and import, and then the year-on-year, growth rate, which we looked at from September 2016 till July 2020. One point I underline is that the decline of trade from the figure below, you will find it just not happen at the point of the COVID. It was happening in the pre-COVID time. So you can see, both in May, June, on March 2019, there was a sharp decline in terms of in both in export and import. So the fall of export and India's export and import started much before. That point we need to keep in mind. Yes, COVID has actually pulled it down, further, so that's what we see. There's a steep fall kind of in a V1 side, and there's also a rise from May onward in July. That's what still it is in below, zero in terms of the growth. So hopefully if the trend continues, it will be positive very soon. And in this time, what I found, the interesting point is, one is when you look at who are the, when there's a crisis, the countries take a trade strategy, either facilitating or they look at more inwardly to protect. So the protectionism also, it has grown up. Sometimes the trade facilitation, initiatives by the governments of the countries that I have picked up, they look at the trade facilitation, but it behaves as a protection. For example, some of the measures for the health hazard or food safety, those are SPS and TBT. Countries look at in compliance with WTO, but it behaves negatively in the short term. So because the rules suddenly, don't, if you change suddenly, the exporters and importers are manufactured in that way. They have to comply with a higher standard, and they have to change their product process and the manufacturing process as well. So that may take time, or it may have a cost. So that time there would be, it may behave it from the importing country point of view, it's a protection, but from the exporting kind of view, they look at it, as a negative. So given that, this is the time to look at who, the trade partners and how they are looking at it. during the crisis time. Pre-COVID time, I look at more, the top three was United States, UAE, and China. They have changed slightly interchangeably, but look at India's exports, still, increase marginally for 9.99%, in terms of India's global exports. April, June, that's the period we took in 2019 to April, June in 2020, slightly increased. So US, China, and UAE, they have changed the position, the top three. And the rest of the things are usual. Almost 70% to 80% of the India's global exports are directed to the 20 trade partners. But the interesting point is the import side. What is most interesting? India continued to import more with China. We have seen that because of the differences between India and China, both countries introduced punitive measures each other's trade. So, but the data indicates, that in the COVID period, April to June, India's total import, 18% actually came from China. That's quite a rise. We expected it should be less than 13%, which was actually April corresponding period in 2019. So this is a point to be noted, that China is continue to be the top trade partner of India. And top 3%, there's a high concentration in the top three when it comes to the imports. China, US, and UAE, 27% was India's import of three countries, before COVID, and during the COVID, this concentration has increased 32%. Perhaps why it has, suddenly jumped. Maybe there are some, we need to go in very detail minutely about the month-wise, HS code-wise, the data. We cannot conclude much about it. Perhaps this could be, kind of a spillover. We give an order in the month of January in 2020, and that was delivered in the month of April. So precisely, you won't be able to tell, which is a cause and effect. But the point I would like to argue that China is one of, still continue to be one of the top trade partners of India, and there is a still sharp rise between pre-COVID and post-COVID in terms of India's imports from China. So does that mean that we had a business as usual? Because there is a concentration rise in the top three partners. Is actually data says something else. We looked at trade openness and also based on that, look at the quarterly growth, quarterly rate of growth of export for Q1 2017 to 2018, the pre-COVID. Post-COVID, we picked up 2019 and 2020. Red and blue dot, the difference is that the blue dot is the one which is the COVID-affected people, which is 1,000 COVID-19 cases per billion population. And certainly 1,000, when we did this analysis, we thought that 1,000 is okay, COVID patients for per billion populations, which is not very severe, but anything more than 1,000, it could be very severe. So red dot represent the scatter points, represent the countries having more than 1,000 cases per billion populations. And you can see the pre-COVID and post-COVID, the trade openness, if you put it in the x-axis and in the growth of exports in the y-axis, you will find that the scatter pre-COVID and the post-COVID is all the scatter points, actually, particularly the one which is the red one, they came very closer, and the cluster is more towards the zero line or below the negative. So that's what we found, and the scatter that indicates that the COVID outbreak has actually had a very negative impact on the trade openness. And obviously, because countries have closed border, the export didn't pick up, and those countries who are having suffered heavily or continue to suffer heavily from the COVID, they are very scared. Whether they will open up further or they will, close the border. So there's a dilemma, we call it the prisoner dilemma. And the countries, they look at more from the point of view to procure the essentials. At that time, when we pick up the data for Q1 2020, procuring the PPE kits, the masks, sanitizer, other health-related medicines, drugs, foods, those were the priorities. So probably the countries look for very, very structured an export as well as, you know, the import that time. That has become, you know, reflected in the two scatter points. So what we can, you know, take from this slide is that in trade openness decline, more into the countries who are suffering more from the COVID. That trend similarly continued also in the GVC because you know, trade disrupted, border closed, and countries, of course, you know, they won't do for, you know, go for more continuing with the networks. So there is a clear indication of the decoupling, even though we need to go, you know, beyond of this scatter points. We need to go the product wise that we have done. Here the blue dot and the red dot are same thing. That's 1,000 cases, more than 1,000 cases and less than 1,000 cases, and that also indicates very clearly that there's a huge disruption in the global value chain between the pre-COVID and post-COVID. I should not spend much time in, you know, telling. So these two scattered slides are actually, you know, motivating slides that motivate, you know, motivate us to carry forward for the next part of my work and discussion or the analysis. So what we looked at here, that the question that we raised in
Hello. So can you hear us, Prabir sir?
Has the link gone or what?
No, but we can see.
Stand still, no?
Yes.
Maybe his home connectivity gone in Calcutta.
No problem. That happens few times. I'll just check.
Yeah. Is a laptop, I think, on.
I think disconnected, right?
Disconnected. Okay. Carry on.
I do not know how it happened. I don't know, you know, how long I was disconnected. Can you help me?
Only 1 minute before.
Oh, right. So I start from this slide.
Yeah, that equation. Regression equation structure, pre-COVID and COVID. Yeah.
Yep. And I really do not know how did it happen. It is maybe from your side. Okay. Let me continue. So this is yeah. So here in the openness GVC growth on the left side, pre-COVID period and post-COVID period. The GVC, you know, the data which is UNCTAD and ORA global value chain data indicates, and you can easily calculate. Here is the, we looked at the backward participation. To clarify, the backward and forward participation is between the backward participation is basically, you know, between supplier and receiver, here exporter and importer. So in case India is here is you know, the receiving country, the importing country. If an exporting country, which is for example the Thailand, so in between Thailand and India. So whatever India receives parts and components in terms of goods or maybe in services, this we count in the backward, you know, and the backward linkages. Then it is assembled, for example, you know, India assemble receiving the parts and components from you know, it's exporting countries to Thailand, as I said as an example, assemble those and then pass it to or export it to another destination. So from India to another destination in the forward, so we call that forward linkage. But here, the data availability and for our own sake of discussion, we picked up only the backward participation. There is another reason for the GVC backward participation is the developing countries between like in India and Thailand or India and other ASEAN countries. There is sort of more linkages in the backward than the forward. So that's why we picked up the backward participation. GVC data is the foreign value added, embodied in exports, percentage of India's global exports. This is standard data is available. Openness, export plus import, as a percentage of GDP. We picked up the data for 2018 in some countries where the data is 2019 not available, and we compared both pre and post COVID period, and that we have in kind of 150 countries. The fits are good. Pre-COVID we have a 3 model, model 1 to 3, and post-COVID we have a 3, model 5, 4, 5, and 6. And the sign, the significance, both are expected, which we expected in the model to tell us. So here, what we can take from this very simple OLS kind of an assessment is that more into the COVID-19 period, so not a post-COVID, COVID-19 period, is that your trade openness and those global value chain, those are negatively affecting our exports. So that's clearly coming for the quarterly data 2019 and 2020. And another point, I thought that this simple model can also tell us that if those countries which are having high trade openness, those are countries that are having high GVC participation in the pre-COVID period, and the pre-COVID estimated figures I'm not going to quote it here. I'm more keen to here on the COVID period. So those are having in the pre-COVID time high openness, high participation in the GVC. They're having a high export growth. That's become completely flipped in case COVID time. That's what our model indicates. Here we found those countries which are having high openness and high GVC, they didn't work, and in the COVID time, and that's having also negative relations with our export growth in model 4, 5, and 6, and more precisely in the model 4. This also tells us that when there is a crisis and when the countries are delinking in the value chain, export declining, then what countries, particularly the developing countries, what they can look at more closely, how they strengthen their supply chain. And so this could be a takeaway from this very simple OLS regressions that, and the data indicates that countries need to strengthen their supply chain networks. And perhaps this is a time when countries they want they move towards the same direction to strengthen their supply chain, domestic as well as the cross-border. And that's what we found. Many countries, they have taken reform measures and and also the initiatives, policy initiatives to strengthen the supply chain. That I'll come back once we close towards the end of the discussion. Next is first part of my presentation talked about that we need to look at openness. Openness and export growth. So the next task is to look at the trade forecast. We always need to see we need to see what kind of the trade forecast we can see for our trade partners, because if our partnering countries within India, if the trade declining, and so there could be a doubt in our mind that shall we go for a supply chain, strengthening the supply chain, or we will cut off and then we concentrate it somewhere else. So we need to look at how, in which way, in the trade costs behave and your trade profile changes with our trade partners. That's very important. If you synthesize in that way, that if United States and India, in the post-COVID or in the COVID period, if they don't have much trade compared to what it used to be in the pre-COVID, then certainly India and United States will not having very positive interest in strengthening their trade linkages, because trade linkages in any way that's declining. So maybe in that case, both countries will be motivated to concentrate. Some other countries where strengthening the trade linkages would be beneficial for the country. So that's what. So we need to. The second part of our discussion should be, that's what we did. Trade forecast based on the gravity modeling. The augmented gravity model, is very popular. I don't need to go and explain it. Those who are following up the gravity and methodologies, very clear to them. We have an export on the left-hand side. This is the bilateral partner countries, I and J. Then usual, the figures and dummies and all. And then we have taken a trade cost. That's very important. That is between the two countries, I and J, and the trade cost database based on the UNSCAP trade cost database. Let's see the quick outcomes that from the augmented results indicates. We have a number of observations is quite large, 2,414, and most of the estimated parameters are positive, significant. Expected signs are like distance, FTA. These are usual signs. I think that's quite quite fallen came out in our expectations. So based on these estimated coefficients, we then we did a forecast. Now, how it happened? It's very simple. That if you estimate your if you have the estimated coefficients, only thing you need to know that here would be the GDP, future GDP of a reporting country, future GDP of partner country. The rest of the things, if you keep it remain same, then you can easily estimate what would be the likely trade scenario by in case if I is India by by country J. So that's what we did. Here we picked up the GDP numbers from IMF forecasts recently, which is IMF World Economic Outlook database, and we found that 2019 is the actual trade. India's global trade was $804.805 billion. So 2021 and 2025, according to us, it would be scenario like 2020 next year. It would be around to 879 billion, and by 2025, India's total trade is likely to cross $1 trillion. One can argue on it, one can agree or maybe disagree, but interesting point could have been here that we haven't shown so far, that if what is the business as usual scenario without COVID and what we have estimated in the COVID and compare it. So we haven't done it, but quickly it indicates that the decelerations, because 2019 $800 billion total trade, and 2021 which is 878, whereas in 2021 Indian government's forecast tells that India is going to exceed $1 trillion. That didn't happen, and so this is the scenario, and we have the data by country. This is an aggregate number, and we looked at also. We also looked at India's trade with ASEAN. The same trend continues in 2021. We expected India's trade with ASEAN to exceed about 200 billion, but it will land into maximum $100 billion next year, like that. So there is an effect of COVID or the recession on India's global trade by region as well as by partners. This is we have done as the second part of our and by country also some numbers we have generated: region, South Asia, ASEAN, Japan, etc., and you can see the volume that we have estimated in 2021 and 25. Just India's exports In general, it's not picking up. For example, in South Asia, it may be 36 billion by 2025. In Japan, India's export, which is presently 4.74 billion last year, it may reach to 6.70 billion. So growth are not that very high. And if you look at the destination-wise, how it looks at, if 2021, India's forecasted export. So this is, most of our export will be directed with in the US, 60 billion, Europe will having 68, Central Asia will be 57 billion. I think this is the Middle East, 57 billion, and China could be, our Indian exports might be 20 billion, Southeast Asia 42. These were the figures is for 2025, which there is a change compared to 2021, but it's still, United States will continue to be our largest trading partner, which 2021 it's 60 billion, it might reach to 74 billion Indian exports, and followed by Southeast Asia, China. What we found in our model that India's export to China will not pick up much, it will be 30 to 35 billion. So these are the numbers we have forecasted, and certainly takeaway from this, these numbers is that we need to strengthen our supply chain with those countries or the blocks which telling us the rise of India's exports. So United States, for example, or European Union, or African countries, Southeast Asian countries. So these are the new, the countries or regional blocks through which will be, receiving an Indian, expected to receive India's major exports. And suddenly we need to strengthen our supply chain in these countries or these blocks. And I will come later on in last part of my presentation. So I still have 6 minutes to go, and which is the last part of my presentation is that where I seen that what's the impact of trade facilitation on India's trade costs and its impact on Indian exports. The reason is those who are very new to the trade facilitation, that the trade facilitation agreement has come in effect. Countries in the pre-COVID, they have, they ratified it, set up their commitments. National trade facilitation committees have been set up. Countries have been empowering, certain, authorities in the country to look at trade facilitation more closely, and countries are, as per their commitment, they are, notifying which categories they will be following, category B or C or A. Normally developing countries, least developed countries, they have preferred category B and C, and you can see the red, the bar are quite high for the case of Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Laos, and Kenya. So also the blue one, in the countries you'll find here, also like Ecuador, Kenya, or Vietnam, Pakistan, like that. So countries are voluntarily, committing to the category B and C. So trade facilitation is very much now driving the global trade. And during the COVID time, there are many notifications. In another paper, I looked at those notifications closely, and we found in case of South and Southwest Asia that many of the notifications, including WTO trade facilitation agreement, many of those are relating to business facilitation, many of those relating to paperless trade, digital trade facilitation, like that. So we looked at those measures for 2019, like by country, and there are transparency, there are formalities, there are institutional arrangements, paperless trade, cross-border paperless trade, for example, by country. And now you have the UN Survey, Global Survey for Trade Facilitation and Paperless Trade Agreements. So it clearly indicates that countries are more looking into a transparency and also the paperless trade. So we add another source from the UN Global Survey on Trade Facilitation and Paperless Trade Implementation. It also indicates that they have countries are also looking at the paperless trade arrangements, which are contactless in the COVID time, or humanless trade facilitation, which actually countries, there are many examples in the world that countries is actually forced to adopt in the paperless trade arrangements, and filing documentation online, for example, like that. So digital trade facilitation has become, the mantra for the global trade, the development, and the countries are more looking at both from WTO trade facilitation point of view, and also, countries unilateral or some plurilateral measures in terms of trade facilitation, and precisely the digital trade facilitations. So we looked at that are those trade facilitations really addressing the trade cost, and if we control the trade cost, then how it's going to affect our trade flow. So what we did, we looked at simultaneous equation modeling based on RB's 2013 and Yandual paper in 2018. In the first stage, we have a trade cost regressed over several trade facilitation indicators, starting with distance, language, blah blah blah, and then it comes to time to export, both digital, non-digital. So whatever the data on the trade facilitation is available, for 2015 to 2019, for 108 countries, we picked up. Our interest is that we need to, get the T IJ hat estimated at T value, which we then bring it in the second stage, and where in the second stage you have a left-hand side export flow between I and J, and then the usual gravity data, and the distance has been replaced by the estimated trade cost between the I and J in the second stage. Thereafter, we have taken up some of the indicators, which based on diagnostics that we did, basically to look at simultaneous equation modeling specifications in terms of identifications of instruments for under identification or weak identification, or kind of an over identification. All these are indicate that our identification was as per the model and expected. So I come back to the second stage, and here the point, you also need to look at that we have controlled the WTO trade facilitation agreement separately than digital and non-digital, and also the custom CTI. So otherwise, if you take one singular trade facilitation, that may not capture, the point that we are in the COVID time, or kind of a new normal for the trade facilitation, or which will drive the global trade discussion and the global trade movement, like digital as well as custom CTI. And also we have controlled the non-digital. In some countries, they are not very equipped to digital trade facilitation, so they're still continuing in the manual systems, island countries, landlocked countries like that. What are the results? For the sake of time, I'm not going to discuss. This will be there in the paper. The usual, indicators all available online. No need any further discussion, on this. I just skip it from there. So first stage, we have picked up ASEAN countries, Indo-Pacific countries, and all countries. Why Indo-Pacific group? Because this is the recent development, and indicators here, the distance, it would be positive because we are regressing with, in the left-hand side, the trade cost data. So we expected, distance to be positive, unlike the usual gravity of the negative. So the signs are all expected, and they are the statistically significant. So based on which we estimate the TIJ, and then we adopt TIJ in the second stage. So as you know that when you do the instrumental variable modeling or simultaneous equation modeling, if the both first stage and second stage are properly estimated and properly modeled, then your results will be more interested into the second stage. So second stage indicates that the GDP, both partner country and the reporting country, both are significant, robust. TIJ, which is the estimated from the first model that came out negative and statistically significant. I am very, very happy that the digital trade facilitation indicators for Indo-Pacific countries, for all countries, coming statistically significant at a 5% level, and also the custom CTI for all. So custom CTI means those countries who adopted an electronic filing of documents through customs. In India, we call it SWIFT. Countries which adopted a digital trade facilitation, certainly they promote trade much faster than those those who haven't done it. So these are one of the takeaways from both simultaneous equation modeling. Remind you, this is not a comparison between post-COVID or pre-COVID. As I said, that when you did the simultaneous equation modeling, we had a data up to 2019. So it's the panel data for 2015 to 2019 or onward. The panel data analysis indicates both in simultaneous equation form, in the gravity simultaneous equation in the framework, it indicates that countries, they need to focus more into digital trade facilitation, more into customs electronic data interchange than a manual, than kind of which are having very, very thick border compliance procedures at the border between the countries, exporters and importers. Now the last part, and I have 2 minutes to go, the takeaways and the concluding part. Certainly, when you talk about a futuristic trade policy in this changing world order, in case of India, it will come obviously in our mind that you have an overlapping FTA partners. So when you have an overlapping FTA partners at the regional level, how will you going to manage those digital trade facilitation specific to a country, or the country should go for a unilateral? Certainly a multilateral initiative is the best scenario, because you cannot discriminate your trade policy between the your trade partners, right, when you accepted an MFN. But for some certain reasons, the countries are forced to enter into the regional blocks or sub-regional bilateral arrangements. And when the sub-regional, the regional bilateral arrangements are beyond our control, as it happened, I just picked up in India cases, and also only with the Southeast Asia and East Asia, you will see there's so many FTA partners, and it's very difficult, to actually pursue a very, very, concerned, very positive trade policy, looking at it in India as a domestic and national interest, like Atmanirbhar Bharat, for example, which was introduced recently. Somehow you have to rationalize, and again, a little digress from what we did in the analytics, is that your FTA partners, when you have a multiple, can we think for kind of an bigger picture? Now, how long can be a bigger? Then it is better to adopt this multilateral arrangement, WTO. So that may not be the ideal way to. That may be an ideal way to go, but maybe in reality is different. So we in the paper, we are going to write that we need to do a rationalization of this all FTS, and wherever possible, you may like to withdraw. That's you may like to withdraw and concentrate more into where that can serve you, the purpose. That may be the reason that Indian policymakers have been influenced that to withdraw from the RCEP. Maybe there are some strategic and political interests, which is, and this is not a forum to talk about it. Second is, this was a kind of thing that we had a past. So what is unfolding in the moment, because your trade policy you'll be following very much into the unfolding trade architecture, and accordingly government when drive the trade policy, they will have to take the initiatives, trade facilitation at WTO or trade facilitation at the regional level, bilateral level, that the government will be taking a decision accordingly. So I think in this changing in the circumstances, what I think it's sort of a kind of a Tokyo Metro line, and I popularly call it. Those who have seen the Tokyo Metro, they have several lines going on from one place to another place. So that kind of a scenario, where India is a party to it, it's emerging You have a purple line, you have a green line, you have a yellow line, a blue line, all those things are going on. So you only have to ride in those lines which take you to the ultimate destination. So I think India's will be, continue to have an interest somewhere. Again, when you do a trade policy, you cannot also ignore your strategic interest, right? So it's often we call it a strategic trade policy, and I think strategic trade policy doesn't come masters and MPhil or PhD courses in Indian universities teaching international economics. Particularly, university next to my house is Calcutta University Economics Department in Calcutta. So India's continue to have an interest in the BIMSTEC. On EAS, India has withdrawn from RCEP. India will be continue to have in ASEAN. India-ASEAN FTA is being reviewed. And of course, where India is not party, India has withdrawn from RCEP, and India is not party to CPTPP. But look at it, there are two other arrangements, even though one is security arrangement like Quad, like India, Australia, Japan, US. There has been discussion that, security dialogue is good, but security initiative may not sustain, looks hollow if there is no economics. So in the long run, if Quad to sustain, then economics to be added. So there's a discussion happening in a Quad FTA, or kind of a trade policy discussion in how can be added in the Quad, and also supply chain resilience initiative, which has been initiated by India, Japan, and Australia. As you have seen our analysis, very initial stage of analysis indicates that when there's a decoupling which is happening, you agree or disagree, particularly with China. There's outflight of capital enterprises coming from China. There's going to elsewhere. So in this case, if we strengthen the supply chain, and which is obviously coming from our own analysis, it is good for the country. By the way, supply chain resilience is not specific to any particular regional bloc or any particular country. It is a kind of a generic. So supply chain strengthening means it will add value to the national economy as well. So to conclude from the previous slide, there is a rationalization as needed, and that's what perhaps the policymakers are thinking to look at a trade which are more quality wise and rewarding. And there is a change in the trade architecture, and which is emerging. As I said, it looks like several underground metro lines like in Tokyo Metro, and India is somehow a party to several of them. India has withdrawn from RCEP, but who knows that India might come back to CPTPP where China is not there, and maybe US might join in CPTPP. The current US the designated president who and the previous President of the United States, they have initiated the TPP. They might be thinking that to invite India to TPP after joining. But I do not know much further about the politics of in the United States, whether they will be able to pass it in their Senate and etc. etc. So this is sort of a new architecture. So takeaways, last slide, very quickly. First, as I said, the disclaimers that there are data limitations. Our analyses are very, very simple. When we look at the GBC openness, and when you look at the trade forecast, and then when you look at the new kind of a trade policy, kind of in a trade-off between trade liberalization and trade facilitation, and in trade facilitation, where we should look at more into digital, paperless trade process simplification like that. So 5 takeaways. One is that we certainly, we need the countries, we need to promote trade openness. So not an isolation, or it's not a phase, not a period, it's not good. So isolation means that you are cutting down, going to an end, so the value chain will disappear. So to support trade openness and to strengthen the value chain, we need to look at the supply chain and the connectivity, skilling, logistics services, more into express logistics services. That's important. Express logistics services, not the ordinary one. So this is what I think the countries should look at more closely in the COVID era and the post-COVID. Come back, take a policy to strengthen the trade openness, strengthen the value chain, and certainly the trade facilitation. And here I said the digital trade facilitation and trade facilitation reforms. We found the notifications by the countries, particularly India, for example, issued during the COVID time from March to July or January to July. India took lots of new reforms like submission of the certificate of origin online, allowing goods to happen contactless basis. But I haven't found anything on the India's National Trade Facilitation Committee. What have they done so far? That's kind. So paperless trade, trade process simplification, trade, those are very important, and they will pick up, certainly in the post-COVID post-COVID arrangements, post-COVID period, the trade policy discussion. Countries that are continuing to ratify, continue to, tell us about their implementation of WTO trade facilitation. So multilateralism is still, and is matter most. So I think we should, strengthen our WTO process. Second and last, the point number 4 is that please look at some of the strategic aspects of trade policy, like unfolding regional architecture, as I said in my presentation. So we need to wait and watch how the big brothers, they are coming up with their, is it kind of a more bilateral, as the previous US government was thinking about, or if they will come back to a regional bloc, and then which will actually trigger new kind of arrangements. India's role, India should continue. India is, certainly being of the market, democracy, private sector, many institutions, etc. Continue to play a very strong role in this rules-based trade arrangements, and certainly India has the mandate to strengthen the WTO process. India has, should be part of, many other arrangements. So that is why I think India very active, what it used to be earlier in regional blocs, both as well as in the multilateral forums, both the WTO, G20, BRICS, Indo-Pacific, Quad, with ASEAN, with Africa, and many other places. This is the time, I found very noticeable change happening in the foreign policy, and both in the international commerce and in the foreign affairs. The last one, which is purely India, in the national agenda, that India has to continue with its own reform and domestic policy, be it, so that you strengthen manufacturing competitiveness, the value chain, connecting the value chain through globally or regional value chains. One hand we have tariff liberalization, we look at the supply chain resilience, but if those, to effectively help our manufacturing process, services process, regional and global value chain development, India has to undertake reform process. Now, which way the reform to be carried out, this is another discussion, but we need to pick up some of the leading sectors, some of the lead policy measures, at least in this changing time. And there is another 2 things which come often, to the Indian policymakers and to our mind. One is that India's objective to reach, 5 trillion economy by 2025. So due to the COVID, will you be able to achieve it? And second is, if you look for an Atmanirbhar Bharat with the 7 pillars, then certainly connecting with the world would be more rewarding when you look for the Make in India, for the Make for the World. And here, I think bringing SMEs, millions and millions of SMEs, which were never looked after, in that sense, in 10 years ago. This is the time, I think we should give a special focus. And that's what I found very minutely, if you look at the stimulus package of the government of India. Most of it is actually went into the SME sectors. But still, there is a need for improvement, simplification, make it a more business-friendly environment, and bringing them more into the India's exports. So one is that which is kind of an collaborative approach, trade openness, value chain, because trade is dynamic, connected. Second is trade facilitation, which is also depend on, it's kind of again a dynamic aspects. So because India's unilateral trade facilitation will also trigger some other countries, or if it is a regional, or if it is a WTO trade facilitation agreement, that will be done on reciprocal basis. So when it comes to the global affairs, those are primarily which are both unilateral as well as on reciprocal arrangements. And we need to closely follow. We need to closely follow and watch of the regional architecture being unfolded. India has a very strong role in the globally. Our analysis indicates that to strengthen WTO process through trade facilitation, you have to strengthen the WTO. If there is no WTO, then who is going to look after WTO trade facilitation agreement? And then last one is that India's purely the national agenda. If we have a 5 trillion economy, Atmanirbhar Bharat agenda, then certainly connecting with the world will be more rewarding. And SMEs, they should be given larger focus. Thank you very much. Sorry, I exceeded by 10 minutes.
No issue, no issue. Sir, just thank you so much for giving so much detailed presentation, also updated, I must say. Just for the sake of continuity, I would also like to invite Dr. Durairaj Kumarasamy to add anything.
Yes.
Yes, so that there is continuity, and if you want to raise or highlight any point which Professor Day must have missed, then we can have a one round of feedback or reflection from 2-3 panelists we have. Yes, Professor Kumarasamy, yes, you are muted, so please unmute. Sir, you are muted, please unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
So, yeah, Professor Prabir already covered very widely. So I will intervene when there is any question arises in related to the analysis and anything else. Thank you.
Right, great. Yes, Professor. Yes, Professor Day. Yes, please.
Yeah, just it is a very illuminating lecture. Only last one point for a signature, one thing came. So I was here talking on some issues. So he deliberated on openness and the trade, that linkage, and the gravity model that he did. So basically on 4 issues he highlighted: impact of COVID on the trade, first of all, in the pre-COVID situations and the COVID situations, a comparison. Then impact of trade cost on India's export and other thing. So there are one point I have the clarification to seek from him. Then India's export based on the gravity modeling framework and the role of trade facilitation in the changing world trade. Now, openness and trade relations, then GBC backward participation and quarterly growth of export, how it happened, he has seen. Then through the augmented gravity model also he estimated. So many things have been covered in this. Now, some of the clarifications here I seek, and then it will be open for others also, and the discussants are there, they can put up. Or I will first go to the discussant and then I can go for some queries that I have. Okay, I can put up, please note down that rise in forest reserve, that is foreign exchange reserve. You have seen that after June, there was a certain increase in the foreign exchange reserve in India. And that had happened because export fell, but relatively lower than that fall in the import. Import fell much more. So that's why it happened. Whether some people were arguing because our trade balance are going in our favor gradually, whether it is really a development oriented move or changes that we are noticing. I don't think so, because many of the imported items are needed for your production process. Since production activities gone down, employment gone down, so your whole GDP also impacted by that import decline. So temporarily some foreign exchange reserve increase, I don't think, but what is your opinion and how you look at it? Then another thing is the changing composition of trade. You also mentioned here that only that medical related items, essential items, that was going on, and also all the trades are on the online mode, so most of their, and so electronic things and related, your data pack, all these businesses are going on, and it is everywhere. You see even your educational system are switching over towards the online mode, so related trades will be flourishing, that thing. So composition of the export import is bound to change in that direction. Now recently impact of what we can see about the or of this COVID on the impact on the East Asian integration, because in the East Asia integration, you have seen 3-4 days back that China was telling that India missed the development bus because India is not a signatory, did not like to sign with that ASEAN and broader these countries, South Asia's, this agreement points you have seen, because it might hamper India's some dairy and other farmers' activities. So that was a concern, and even the farmers also, that cheap foreign stuffs will come or is expected to come, so better not to be a signatory. So in the interest of the Swadeshi move, you can say one kind, but how you see in the long run. And another questions are that many embargoes have been put, especially the online things, that is apps and others, through which China's several companies do trade in India. So in retaliation also, China is not telling openly, but they already started one, no, that frozen things, there is a COVID, so we will stop importing this type of stuff. So it may go on increasing. So we are telling on the one hand openness and this, and China is also telling that you did not sign. On the other hand, they will not be sitting idle. So, and a substantial foreign trade happens with China. So if it declines, whether India can get that market by expanding its trade with the other countries, because you cannot deny that trade also has an importance, though in your bilateral and border issues. So that is one thing. So these are some of the issues that crop up. Now, here, when you are estimating the things and equational structure that you developed, and then two-stage least square, I saw this simultaneous model, and after that, so there I saw one, the trade cost you measured. Now this trade cost, whether I missed it, I don't know, whether you mean that transport cost or processing cost, or there is an index of this cost, how you quantify this, quantification, okay? There is another variable used, that cross border as a variable on this trade. So whether it is a common border is there or not, yes or no, but or the length of the border, because India might have the border with Bangladesh, India's border with Myanmar, India's border with Nepal, India's border with Cambodia is 0, but surrounding there must be in Pakistan some border. But sometimes in the globalization, in one of my paper I had seen, having common border not necessarily enhance the trade because of the political globalization, social globalization, all these things. So sometimes one index you are behind and another index you are ahead. So even if India, Pakistan, very close border, trade may not flourish in that way, but even if a very less common border, because of the necessity, Indian trade with maybe Arab is very high. So we have seen some, even in they are in the same cluster, or in cluster analysis I had done, though many of the countries are not having their common border, but they are falling in common cluster, and despite having some common border, they are not. And not only that, whether variable here is taken yes, no type, or the length, because as more length means more land custom stations. So more border trade is expected, as India, Bangladesh, so 14, 15 land custom stations in the country, states of northeastern zone. surrounding. So through that, if more land custom station comes, then more expected that border trade will also happen. Apart from that, and he is very expert. I know that he has done East Asian integration, cross-border trade, and common border, all these things. Then that growth revival measure concept, that how we can see that revival measures, how it helps. And India-China trade, I told. And another thing is that facilitation. You have given some criteria of the facilitation, no? That processing thing facilitated, easy processing. But when you put in a regression, how quantity is put, that is numerical values, all these things. I want to learn, because that I have never done myself also. So many questions I put here. So if you have put down, noted down, you can do till now, or otherwise now the other participants or the they can give their clarifications, and after that also you can tell.
Yes, sir. For the sake of time, let us collect all the questions.
All the questions.
So,
Professor Bista, as a
yes,
discussant, please give your observation.
Thank you. And I appreciate Professor Prabir and Duraj Kumar Shami on these, on his, on their, their, presentation, changing dynamics of India's trade. I just, try to, cover the issue of trade issue of India. I found, 87 India export to the 87 countries and import 25 countries. And when we observe the lockdown period, I found, import the, negative minus 28.7%. And in case of the, export, 34.6%. And when we observe the import, trade with the, export to the, other countries, we can find out the almost generally, except the certain, small, country, India has a, positive value with the, small countries, but they will, when we observe the, major countries, we found the, negative or the, contraction situation. But when we observe the, import section, except the China and USA, and India has, all countries have, contraction with the import with the other, remaining countries. That is the situation. And when we observe the, presentation, and that paper, focused more, 4 major issues. One is the trade openness, global value chain, and trade cost. And third one is the, trade facilitation, trade cost. Yes. And in this situation, if you, I found just like I have some, queries, almost, queries, have, put by the, Professor Utpal there, but I have some queries. In the, first question is how can, COVID during the COVID period, and this is the, non-economic measure, that is the lockdown, has disrupted our trade openness, value chain system and everything. And in this situation, how can we trap or capture trade openness and global chain value in terms of the quantification? Yes, we can use the dummy variable, but how can it? This is my first query. And second one is when we observe the model, and its R square is only approximately 30 or 35%, and it means the unexplained variable or the unexplained situation is the more than our explained situation. And in this case, trade openness value we can find out the positive scenario from the 3 models, but the negative scenario in the rest of the post-COVID 3 models. And in this situation, how can we do how can we justify it? Its effect, COVID's effect on our Indian trade statistics. And second one is when I observe the presentation. India, in the actual scenario, India has, Bangladesh and Nepal are the major trade partner in the case of the export trade. But when we observe I observed the, presentation, I just found, focused more on the USA, China, and the ASEAN countries and other countries. And in this situation, it makes, certain times of the U-turn, or it does not reflect the, real situation of the our in India's, trade relationship with the other countries. Third one is I have, a little bit surprised. Nowadays in the, COVID period, how, trade, free trade, WTO's free trade, custom, how can it works? I think all things are missed. And in this situation, we have to, measure its cost or the losses, and in terms of the capture the impact of the trade openness and the trade cost. And in this situation, we use the custom and the WTO. How it is possible? I think this is the, another my query. And last one is I have a, when I observe the model, just like in the case of the export, what are the reasons behind the growth of export trade in small trade partners? And similarly, what is the reason behind the growth of the import trade with China, USA, and UAE, but the negative growth of all other countries? And during the COVID period, last one is in the last model, I think the paper or focused more on the ASEAN and other countries, but in the case of the South Asia, it does not focus. And in this situation, we have a major trade partner, but we have not consider its importance in our model. How can we promote our trade? Or adopt the stimulus, trade stimulus policy to promote our Indian trade in South Asia. And when we observe its major significance, role, or the size in the India's trade. Okay, I finished it. Thank you.
I think you can respond now. Thereafter, some in the chat also 1-2 question came, I can tell.
But sir, let go. We have Simi. Yes.
Because so many together, no, he may miss it.
No, sir. I think speakers can really choose to answer so many questions, because many answers can also be, bilaterally be done.
Good lecture invites more question. Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Simi, please.
Simi, why don't you go on this? Then we
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Utpal Dey and Professor Prabir Dey, for your wonderful lecture. So much to learn. Thank you so much. So we are in the midst of a pandemic, and in the midst of the pandemic, we have had several global developments. So RCEP has been signed, and there is no scope for India to re-enter. And yes, just yesterday or day before yesterday, Ambassador Shyam Saran mentioned that India's retreat from the RCEP architecture puts its Act East policy at stake. So does this show a careful repositioning of India against the Chinese massive presence in the region? That is my first point. And in contrast, we have walked away from RCEP, and we are seeing every day, almost every day, we are seeing one news or the other that we want to expedite our trade with the US and the EU. And with the EU, we have been trying for a long time to have a free trade agreement. And then very recently, we come to know that we are at least trying to have a preferential trade agreement. And with the US, things are so clear. We have, we strove hard for a bilateral investment treaty. in the beginning of the decade and last decade as well, and but there's no sign of it. And then when Namaste Trump event was held in India, there was a lot of enthusiasm about um, the limited trade deal. And then just before the US elections, we found out that this might not happen until the elections. Now elections are over, President Trump has lost the popular votes. So we don't know how is it, how our, as far as we are concerned, India is concerned, the limited trade deal is going to unfold. And again, on the face of it, we are seeing that there has been quite some shying away from the point of India from the comprehensive trade agreements. Of course, domestic concerns that you have pointed out towards the end are important, but we have always cited the domestic reasons for as a reason for the delay. So does this put us as a country always struggling to to keep pace with the economic powers, while we are simultaneously reasoning out the best rational economic interests for our country? And one final part, sir. Do you think that the role of Quad in any way might act as an aversion to the interests of the RCEP countries? Could this have implications on the stability and peace of the Indo-Pacific? Do you think that the climate change considerations should be embedded in the broader trade policy of India? Yes, thank you, sir.
Let me also just use the time and add
Yes,
to
yes.
yes,
Go ahead.
on one point which Simi really raised, that there has been some comments. There has also been one comment by former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram that this really does not make sense because of this. In fact, it used the term also the mentality for this protectionist or sort of what we are envisaging. So many dimensions are coming, and China, US is now not following the multilateralism, so it's something really for us to ponder upon on WTO and everything. But let me first of all congratulate Professor Day and Professor Kumarasamy for really presenting this, I would say, very erudite work, really pertaining with data, and really so much timely that one really has to read so much of the data. In fact, the initial tables only which Professor Prabir mentioned there also he mentioned that so much of issues we need to look at different levels to understand, because the magnitude and other things are also changing. Few things also I really wanted to reflect upon. One was really the what will be the role, what do you see as the role of trade in services? Because that is something which has been the bone of contention also in our RCEP and other agreements. And as India largely, not be seen from like China as, manufacturing hub, but really service sector. So how do you see it, and how do you see the composition also changing? For example, Professor Utpal also mentioned about Forex reserve, so be it capital investments, FII and other things. In service sector also there are financial sectors. China had something anti-IPO, so many apps and other things also now coming. So which direction and change in composition do you see? Sir really also mentioned about many of the things, also using the gravity model, SLS model, many things. But one thing really, sir, highlighted, which was, I would say, one of the most cutting edge thing in terms of work in trade, was incorporation of the digital thing. And really, sir mentioned about Swift and many things. That is something very new and needs to be really looked upon. Also, that brings into the question of role of technology. But really looking into the impact and policy and this part, sir rightly mentioned about our goal of $5 trillion economy by 2024. And in 2024, if I remember the estimation of the foreign trade, I think it was around $1 trillion, sir, which you showed by your estimate. So our Prime Minister also reiterated that yes, we will reach to that goal. So how do you see that? And we have Make in India, MSME, so many of schemes also, but also now we have something called National Infrastructure Pipeline of more than 1 crore, more than 7,000 projects. So many of things also there. We are also inviting foreign capital uh, and other things. Then how do you see in that term? Because last year also, because of this US-China trade war, our finance minister also during the budget, we also tried to had this, red carpet sort of thing to invite those investment for manufacturing, which were going or out migrating from China. So where do you see things now in terms of supply chain? Because supply chain, really the global supply chain after, the globalization, after the subprime crisis, then, a slow globalization, like now deglobalization, that thing happening. On really Atmanirbhar Bharat or what we are also seeing at protectionism in The Economist, I really followed that and read that it will not lead to effect much more on a very vast scale for the global supply chain, because some of the manufacturing or establishment would like to have some manufacturing to them, but not on the mass scale. So is it a very short-term jitters in terms of global supply chain, or will it lead to some sort of really a change, as also the question of composition series Professor Utpal Day is highlighting? We also had a very good lecture by Professor Manoj Pant. There also we highlighted many of these things. But let me really, because one thing in terms of policy and what is happening, I really wanted to ask Professor Day that so what do you think should be done in terms of in India to have our gut increased for Make in India, or to have or harness this opportunity? Because in RCEP and other things also we are saying that this is not the right time, we are on the weak part. So what should be done in that terms, uh, 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 so that, very categorically few things like ease of doing business, or what are the things businesses require or the ecosystem require for us to be ready to be integrated into this kind of foreign trade agreement, or what RCEP or this new Asia is rising, which is also led by China. Lastly, what do you think about EU and Brexit, and then this multilateral and this thing, and what is your view? Because in COVID time, really those economies are behaving very differently. Developing world has a different access to resources, they have different. So your views also on EU and Brexit. I will stop here, we have few more points of discussion, but yes, you can reflect, then we can have more conversation. Professor Day or Dr. Kumarasamy? Yes, anyway.
Yeah, please. Carry on. Then the 1-2 questions in chat box. After at the end, I will.
Amrita also has asked. I will read that.
I saw Amrita's here written. I will ask later. Please go ahead.
Thank you for all your questions. So may not be possible to reply all of them, but as the chair rightly said, you have to reply only which are, I think sure. Now, certainly, first, we have noted some of the comments which are pertaining to our presentation. I'm not going to speak which are, related questions on which I had no presentation, or neither I had discussion for each, like the Brexit and whatnot. So I am not going to respond to all of this. First is Chair remarks on the equation part. One is financial, the foreign exchange reserves, or kind of a financial indicators that is very important. So that certainly is a good suggestion, and while we revise, those estimation, again we will cover as appropriately possible. Second is the trade cost. How did we calculate? What is the difference between distance, trade cost, These we have extensively written for last, almost about 2 decades. Briefly, I found many young scholars here, and Professor Mathur Somas, he has also joined. It is, as you know, that Anderson and Van Wynkoop in 2004, they came out with a couple of papers in JPE, AER, on theoretical foundations. Thereafter, several scholars, they contributed to trade cost literature. The last one, based on which, we use the trade cost bilateral data, that is called Luby paper in 2012 from University of Warwick. Professor Nuyu wrote a paper that which we also call, often quite jokingly called Levity, which is, opposite of gravity. So the trade cost database, TIJ, it is available with UNESCAP, done by the World Bank, Arvis, and ESCAP team, led by Ivan Duan. It covers what? Export or import, either side, between 2 trade partners. Everything that linked with moving goods from one country to another country, or from country I to country J. So this is the way, the TIJ was estimated. This is given. So I don't have to cultivate the data TIJ. And why did I difference then between the distance in the gravity model, the distance supposed to cover that trade cost, right? When in 1962, when Professor Tinbergen was first introduced, this gravity from physics to economics. So that time the data was not available in 62. So distance variable takes anything other than tariff, which is part of the distance between the 2 countries, because countries' distance doesn't reduce, right? This is sort of in kind of an exogenous. The rest other is endogenous. Now, and we know the endogenous growth theory, and with Professor Utpal and others from us, they teach at universities. Precisely that trade cost is very important, that you need to control when you do a structural modeling in your model. Otherwise, we miss. So that's what we have done. Both when we did the trade forecast, and when we when we have so many mosquitoes here, so sometimes I have to fly through them. So and then when you do the impact assessment between in the trade policy, some of the trade policy, variables like trade facilitations. So this is for your interest. Please Google, you will get lots of information on the trade cost literature, etc., etc. Now, these 2, I think I need to give answers to the chair, and very right important questions. Professor Durairaj might have something else. He will speak. We have taken a note for strengthening our paper. Second, if I come to other discussant, Dr. Raghubir, his comments, what I could understood, that he is, that in the paper, why we looked at the data side, so differently, or during the COVID time when customs or the countries are not trading, what was that WTO variable coming, and then he had some questions about, on the equation part. Then he looked at more into the Southeast Asia India relation. Why I didn't look at South Asia? This is a good suggestion. In our paper, as I said, this work in progress I have presented here, which is on ASEAN, Southeast Asia, India, and in a world of the total. Certainly, we have a plan to look at these all in a region specific, South Asia, for example, where we will cover South Asian countries more precisely. But in the paper also we have forecasted India's trade with Southeast Asian countries separately, and for example Nepal or Bhutan, Bangladesh, or like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, like that. And some other queries, I will very happy if he can write, so send a mail, I will be able to look at what precisely. Then I come to the queries which I comments from Dr. Arjun. Of course, I will look for his, if he share with me some from his comments through email. That would help us to look at and strengthen our enrich our paper more, more structurally, because still I have some queries on his queries, because I'm unable to understand some of his very frankly. Comments on trade policy, and something like which Dr. Simi also said, that India has decided to not to be part of RCEP. And there was some op-ed by our former Foreign Secretary raising questions about active policy. All this fine. I am not a person to comment on it, whether this is good or bad. So far, my paper is concerned, we looked at more trade facilitation, more from kind of an unilateral, unilateral initiative for India. Trade facilitation means reforms countries. It is, kind of an offer to every country as a partner. So we argued in the paper that countries need to strengthen its multilateral process, because we have to be equal to everybody. We cannot be good to one countries and bad to some others, because we are the founding country of WTO. So we should be good, and we signed MFN, and not signed. We are actually motivated the world to come closer and sign the deal. So MFN means most favored nation, means equal to everyone. So how can we then be equal to one group of countries and unequal to others? This doesn't make sense to me. So that's what I said. The trade facilitation means that we need to strengthen WTO process. Of course, within that, you have some regional programs, like, as I said, in the Pacific or like that. Yes. Now, RCEP decision, it is taken by the government, and our paper suggests that it is a kind of a supply chain at the moment. What happened in the past? It's the past. As you know very well, if the government has taken a decision at the very highest level, it is this, that we have to follow it. We can argue for the sake of argument, whether it is good or bad. That's good. It should continue. But government has decided not to join an RCEP. Now, in 1991, when India went for a partial liberalization, or precisely 1986, during the Congress time, we started allowing FDI. Then Hero Honda plant in Manesar, or the Maruti Suzuki. That time, if you look at the literature, what we used to see that time, that India has taken a bad policy. How can you go for liberalization? We should look for more import substitution. We should build everything right by ourselves, like Indian Railway does. Everything they manufacture, irrespective of their quality or services. Now, from 1991, when we opt for a liberalization by the same government, and we started getting benefit out of it, are we very concerned about what we did in 1991? But if you look at the media that time, very strong resistance, very, very strong resistance. I just passed out my master's in Calcutta University Economics, and I still vividly remember that time, what happened. So today, when we are talking about RCEP, I think my political response would be, I think government has taken a decision. I think it is better we look at some new agenda, new avenue to strengthen our national interest. That's what I said in our paper, that when there is a decoupling happening, disruption of the value chains, so let's strengthen the value chain between countries. And the strengthening value chain, not necessarily you have to get it from RCEP only. You can do it by by strengthening your country's linkages with bilaterally, multilaterally, or sub-regionally. So I said that let's look at the supply chain resilience initiative, more kind of a trade facilitation initiative, connectivity. Those things very much coming out, from our papers, directly and indirectly. And lastly, before I hand over it to my co-author, colleague, Gurairaj, and the questions raised by Dr. Somesh and Amrita, Dr. Amrita, that on the trade policy, it is not a very static. Whatever we do, that it is we will be dealing with a changing scenario on continuous basis. So you need to look at many things in a dynamic sense. So I think in that way, we be it in ourselves or know ourselves, be it a part of ourselves or you be not a part of ourselves. That might give you a scenario, but if you come out with a a new idea or the new program like the one we have suggested here, who knows that can give more value addition, particularly when the government is looking for strengthening its manufacturing strength, by doing a kind of an Atmanirbhar Bharat, or bringing more technology. The word the Prime Minister used this time at a 50th August speech at Lal Killa, that make in India for make for the world. So if make in India for make for the world means he's not talking about an import substitution or isolation. He must be an eye which I can read out along with other people like you, that it is a strengthening our value chain things. That's what our paper, the empirical part of it gives an indication. So this is a very short answer, and quickly to answer to the very quickly, in a minute. And this is a very important by Dr. Somes in the chat box as a discussant. Yes, he is right that multilateral resistance term, we haven't actually captured it, or if I'm correct, in the first stage, in the first stage of our 2SLS, our purpose was to look at it, based on the Arvisan Yandual model. We look at more into trade costs between I and J, and their multilateral resistance terms doesn't appear.
So we actually captured. It is captured by the fixed effect model.
It is captured by yes.
We will not show everything in detail. But
which one?
MTR.
Oh.
MTR curve.
Yeah.
Just capture the country effect in the model, but we did not show that. We just
and that common border, did you take the length?
Yeah, that is actually dummy variable. One
dummy, yes, no.
Yes. It is based on CEPI.
I think the length would be more appropriate.
Okay.
And then
what do you think?
Yeah, this can be contested.
Yeah.
No, see, what is we cannot be keeping it the theoretical consistency. Sometimes we do a lot of funny things. So
understood.
So keeping it the theoretical consistency, it is Anderson Van Wynkoop type theory. Gravity model calls for certain procedures where the dummies are their common colony, language, and the border. But if you take a length of a border, then we can try, but not an absolute length, in percentage form. For example, India's total length is 10,000 square kilometers. How much it is in international border? So because gravity variables, you need to convert it in log form. So
how many land custom stations are there?
Yes, some kind of a percentage form or a per capita terms that would give you much better results. Then in a big number, 1 million population will give you a very high, estimate coefficients that actually kill your every assessment. So anyway, I share with some insights, and we can go on talking about more about it offline. And Amrita's 2 points and excellent, because Amrita is a brilliant scholar. She worked with us, Commonwealth Fellowship holder, professor, assistant professor at Sussex. So thank you, Amrita, and we worked together many of the time when she was in Delhi. Yes, question one is, it's basically CRDS observations. So she said that there is a trend where some countries may be delinking from GVCs, and there is a move towards strengthening domestic supply chains. That's quite correct. Maybe this is COVID time, because COVID time we are disrupted. We are not talking about the last mile, or maybe not talking about between the countries. So she is right. Of course, away from COVID, or when we are passing the COVID phase, the countries will again come back and look at more into cross-border and the whole supply chain, the network. Point number, there she's raised that what sort of policy responses can incorporate resilience in specific supply chains? One, as I said, resilience means that it's counterfactual when we do the econometrics, right? How good robustness checks, right? Professor Mathur in IIT, he teaches, get his PhD and MPhil brilliant students in IIT to run the robustness, to do the counterfactuals. So here, basically, our supply chain resilience means to do counterfactuals, to do the, robustness. In a way, can we increase the speed of the highway? So India is moving from highway to expressway. You can term it as the resilience. And that's what the government is doing. By the way, China has moved it from a highway to expressway 10 years back. So expressway will help faster movement of goods and services. Express logistics, trade facilitation, which is kind of paperless kind of thing. A harmonization of customs, standards, procedures between the countries and within the country. So these are, which could bring the resilience in supply chain. Plus, this is the point, I argue, those who are following up the nature of the goods, the countries are, like China, they are more into the domestic consumption and they will be doing more technology-oriented, export. So Chinese will be demanding more bigger aircraft than, smaller aircraft. Chinese will be demanding, bigger shipping vessels than the small. Why? They need to send their goods and services very fast from one point of China to another part of the world. So that is why, I think these are, the resilience comes when you expand your capacity supporting that, current supply chains. Quickly answer this point number 2. She said that it is true that digital trade takes a prominent position. Digital trade takes prominent position, and the pandemic almost appears to be a boon to the business acceleration in adopting digital services. However, my question is about SMEs as they adopt new development, etc. So we took the point, yes, and that's why in our paper we said, remember that bringing the MSMEs in export, supporting them, giving them the feel good, giving them support. Even then, for example, pardon me to say that if SMEs go to the bank to do a business, take the money from the bank, and SMEs, they don't return to the bank, no problem. You waive it. Every country gives this kind of subsidy. Instead of giving millions and millions to big guys and who disappear, flee the country, instead of that, you give, little digression from the paper, but we said the SMEs to bring in the exports. Feel good means allow them to access financial access and procedure simplifications. And if you allow me to tell, SMEs may be given some financial support. If they don't return the money, no problem. You just waive it. So that's kind of, my views would be. So with that, I close it and I give it to my friend Durairaj. You have any comments? And then finally to our chair, Professor Utpal.
Sir, there is also issue of GST credit export. GST issue also coming up earlier also. And just Professor Durairaj, Utpal sir, when you mentioned that we measure the length, but our Mumbai port account for 50 to 60% of the total exports. Then how?
No. I am not telling that. I am telling, suppose you have some common border. Mumbai is through the waterway, so not the land border. Now with Nepal we have border, with Bangladesh, with Myanmar. Suppose only yes, no will not give the true value, but okay, some account. But if you have longer border and more land custom stations, definitely border trade varies.
So that is what land custom.
Second question is that distance also taken. So one country may be far away. Suppose your Iran is far away, but you need or depend on Iran for your petroleum. So you have to import even if it is far away. Even if Myanmar is nearer or Thailand is nearer, you cannot import because the goods they produce, you may not need it. Only their flour and other items that you may need. So whatever we need and what they are producing, unless it matches, distance also may not be significant. The far away will be inversely related, it will not. Suppose America is very highly technologically advanced and those technology we need. So even if far away, we have to import. So it depends on that, your matching of the import and export need. Anyway,
there can be really many dummy. So
many dummy, yeah. But there is novelty that they have taken those variables. This is very good thing. I am impressed by those things, and I'm lucky. I learned also a lot because those variables, how to incorporate all this, because I do not work on trade much, so I did not have that idea. So it's very good.
Yes.
So
Amrita also joined, but she had to go.
Already her questions he had addressed. So Kumarasamy, please.
Yes. Yeah. Amrita is also my Rakhi sister. So
yeah,
anyways,
good.
Yes.
So thank you for your detailed questions. And as Professor Prabir said, it's a work in progress. So we'll incorporate all your suggestions in our paper. I'd like to make few clarification in the modeling where some of the questions that you raised. One is that you asked about how we calculated the trade facilitation variable, particularly digital and non-digital. Actually, this is based on a survey by United Nations Global Survey, where they actually collected this survey they have done on 2015, 2017, and 2019. So we have taken that survey data. It's a score based on 5 broader classification. One is custom paperless trade, then transparency, institutional categorization like that. So we actually categorized into 2. One is digital trade facilitation, non-digital trade facilitation. So under digital trade facilitation, we have taken paperless trade and cross-border paperless trade. So the score is between 0 to 1. Higher the score, higher will be the trade facilitation measures they have implemented in their respective countries. So this is what we have taken in our paper. The other one, and how Dr. Raghubir Bista, he raised about how we quantified the COVID in our analysis. Of course, it is non-economical issues, but we try to capture the impact by taking the dummy only in a way that the countries which have affected have the cases more than 1,000 per million population. We have tried to distinguish like a red dot. So what is their level of growth of export given their trade openness, GVC? If you see the scatter plot also, you can notice that the number of COVID cases more than 1,000 per million population, they are experiencing a negative growth rate compared to the countries which have COVID cases less than 1,000. This is probably maybe due to the stringent policy measures they are taking in their country, full lockdown, and a lot of NTMs also they imposed in respective countries, which actually restricted the trade at that point of time. Maybe it is a momentary or a short term, but it may revive in future. But we try to capture that impact. Of course, it's very difficult, but it's our attempt to capture the COVID and between the COVID and non-COVID affected countries. So that's how we have taken it. And
is done?
Yeah, and the NTM, I already replied that we already captured the MTR, multi-rated trading system, through our fixed effect, capturing the country effect in our model. So there are several questions that we raised that we will incorporate in our model. Professor Utpal Day, he actually rightly pointed out the foreign exchange reserve. So that's a very interesting thing that we will try to include in our model. We'll also try, actually the openness and GVC versus the quarterly growth of export growth, that we did with the first quarter only. Now the second quarter is released by IMF. So we'll try to include in our analysis so that the number of observation will increase. In a way, we can try to reduce the error, because the R square, as he said, it is only 0.32. Maybe because it's a cross section. We have taken just a point of time analysis and we have done it. So we'll try to improve it in the next stage of analysis. Thank you. Thank you for your valuable inputs.
May I
Thank
add
you very much. So any more question, Dr. Somesh? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can. Very
Please,
interesting research, and especially when Professor Prabir talked about this internal trade cost, TII, that he talked about, that Novi's paper. And especially that assumes importance because when you talk of inland waterways, now the government of India says that there will be connectivity between Delhi to Haldia through Banaras. And then if you join the Brahmaputra circuit, then you may be connecting Bangladesh and then further East Asia. And Professor Prabir has done extensive work on what happens if you connect, say, Haldia to a seaport in Myanmar, then use it using the Kaladan River, reach the Kaladan River port, and then use all those 69 bridges that you had during World War II between Burma, Myanmar, and Nagaland and Mizoram. So point is, which gives you the lowest transportation cost? Is it the Haldia, Siliguri, Kohima, or is it the Delhi, Haldia, and then Brahmaputra circuit, and then reaching all East Asia, or is it through the seaport? So that needs to be found out. So this gravity model, although it covers the macro part, but very interesting that Professor Prabir also could include GVCs on the right-hand side. And what was little, I couldn't understand, that after COVID, GVC and trade openness is having a negative impact on trade. So that is something that probably needs further explanation. So this is what came to me immediately. So, and thank you so much.
Professor Bista, you were making any point? Yes. Professor Bista, yes.
May I ask the only one observation? After the March 2020, India's export and import has been improving. And what is your observation behind this such improvement of the trade of India?
Yeah, I just we have to I think close this conversation.
Yes.
So it's a very interesting point. It is the rise of India's export, and from May onwards, it's basically June. You can say June onwards. One is we haven't done in our paper, but if you allow me to share why from my own observations. One is the countries which went into lockdown and extended version of lockdown, this feeling this isolation is actually having a very long-term damaging effect. So let's gradually open up. So all the export ban and restrictions, countries started withdrawing. This is the one. So that is why there is kind of a revival. Point number two, where is that each and every country which earlier used to be very, very strict facilitation of the trade, sort of kind of an prohibition, kind of a discouragement elements of trade export. Those were converted into very futuristic trade scenario. For example, if it is if you are an exporter, you have to comply to several government procedures, Professor Vista. And the exporters from Nepal, they know it very well because their burden is, first is landlocked. So they have to do a lot of things, additional things compared to a country like India or Bangladesh. So suddenly during this COVID time, they were forced to introduce a kind of very liberal, supportive arrangement for them, which was used to be very, very tough during peak COVID. Because you know why? Because government doesn't want to change much and they believe in status quo until there is a political directions. So India has been doing quite well in trade facilitation point of view, and this has been momentum has been added during the COVID time. One great example: most of the South Asian countries, including Nepal, they allowed exporters to file export document online. What used to be earlier, that please bring your documents to me, I'm a government regulator. I would like to see what you are there. So time, cost, all those added discouragement. So these were actually disappeared, and rather it is sudden disappear. Sometimes disappearance takes step by step, but in this case, sudden disappear, and that has been a positive impact with a lag. In June or in May end or June early when you see this export is picking up. Third, the demand from importing country. India's export that time, health-related goods, pharmaceutical, drugs, all relating to COVID and related infrastructure. India, which is used to import a lot of medical items, then started India exporting all those, ventilators including. So those actually added, kind of a momentum to come back to export, rice. So that trend continues for some of the other countries as well in the region. In short, this is my answer. And then, from July onward, you must have noticed that people of the, they realize they have to live within COVID, right? So let's comply to the usual procedure, mask, sanitizer, and other medical drugs, but start our own business. So that kind of, environment, which we presently are watching, there's a risk high, but business has come back in a way. Thank you. Durai Raj, there is a question to you by Dr. Somesh. Suddenly, you have to give an answer. When he said, that he has some clarity required. Maybe we can, work further on it. Durai Raj, please.
No, I think he has made it clear that they use the two-way fixed effect for capturing the MTR term. That is
no, not that one. Somesh, you said that when we did, the quarterly growth exports regressed over, GVC, and when in the, in the COVID era, the GVC estimated coefficient coming negative, significant, as well as the one which is openness. So, and I said, this is a GVC and openness negatively affected our export growth. Your question is, we have to look at it more carefully. You're right. Maybe this is what I thought Durai Raj might have some answer. Durai Raj, for you.
Yeah, actually, the purpose of the analysis to see the impact of COVID on export growth with trade openness and GVC is that whether the COVID, if at all, affect the trade, to what extent if the countries are more towards trade openness, more integrated in terms of trade, either higher the trade, ideally higher the trade, higher would be the trade growth of export. That is what we experienced in our analysis and also the scatter plot, where the higher the trade openness, we experience higher the growth of export. But the post-COVID or the COVID period, what happened? The countries which are more openness to trade are experiencing the negative growth rate. Similarly, higher the GVC are expected to have a higher growth of exports. That is the ideal situation. But in the COVID period, what happened? The countries which are having high GVC, higher GVC participation rate, are experiencing negative growth of exports. So it actually shows that the countries which are more integrated towards trade or more openness to trade are the more sufferers of due to COVID. That is what actually reflected. So this actually also shows the supply chain disruption vividly in the COVID period. So that analysis just point to make that the countries which are more dependent on trade in that particular point of time actually affected by the COVID compared to the countries which are. I also done one analysis. I'll quickly like to show that just for your understanding.
So,
can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This is another one which actually what I've done, the number of top trading partner versus the openness of trade, where each country's respective, it's a bilateral data, each country's respective country's top trading partners. So if, say for instance, India, if the India's top trading partners are highly affected by COVID cases, either India and also the top trading partners impose a lot of restrictions, or the number of cases exceed here, all the dots shows that the COVID, the countries which are experiencing more than 1,000 per million population are affected by the COVID cases. So you can easily see that all the European Union countries and the USA also there, which actually have high vulnerability to trade because they are trading among themselves. So the intra-trade in the European Union very high, and also the countries which are more dependent on trade with high trading partners which are affected by COVID are the high vulnerability trade. That the countries which are in the left corner, ASEAN, Central Asia, South Asia also there, which are not much integrated within themselves. That means the top trading partners among themselves are not much affected by COVID cases, which actually shows much of a potential. That's what, in fact, post-March 2020, there are bilateral trade level. The trade is actually increasing and positively with most of the South Asian countries and some of the Asian countries, like even Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and not with Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, where we were trading high with those countries which are affected. The countries which are less trade with those countries, where India sees high growth in export in the recent months, actually. Even with respect to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka also, in the recent months, we actually exported high compared to the previous the periods. So we still have to explore with the recent data till July. We'll try to do some analysis to see how the trend goes in this regard.
Thank you. I have to actually leave.
So I think we have come to the fag end of the discussion. Arjun, or any more queries or by anybody?
No, nothing. So you give your concluding remarks.
Conclude, no?
Yeah.
So
yes, sir, we can wrap. Yes.
Yeah.
Very much over time. Yes.
And then it was a very fruitful discussion, deliberation. Congratulations to both the authors, Dr. Kumarasamy and Professor Prabir De, who is the lead speaker here, and other participants also here for their valuable contribution and raising some important queries. So I think that will also enhance the quality of the paper also. We expect some better outcome, and it is already a very good thing, because I told that some novelty is there, and in the analysis many of the things I also could learn. And only that if some more data you could get, I think it could be better and it could improve more. So second quarter data I think you may get now. So again, whole exercise you have to do. It is a lot of hard work, because same work you have to do twice, thrice. So that is also, we understand, very difficult to do that job also. So anyway, these are different dimensions. Earlier also other dimensions of the trade have been discussed by Raghuvirji, and today we got a totally different aspects, and some other on the trade issues also. Some other speakers will come, and those will be, so it will be overall very good that in this series that we are covering that on the South Asian countries and how the government policies are evolved, and they are taking care of all these impacts and how to reduce the impact of the pandemic, and channelize the efforts and the resources to revive all the economies, not only the trade aspects, but also others, that other different other speakers are addressing the other things. So I think so. And Prabir has told that we are not that same title, not from same family, don't think. But anyway,
We
so
are the same family actually. We are from the same family.
maybe in a broader family you can get some few generations back, we can see, because only 15-16 kilometers away our villages in the same district.
Today topic India's trade, not personal relation.
So again, thank you very much, and I think we should come to an end. And this is I declare that this session is closed. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please.